This is a real photo from an exorcism.
There's just the first of many baseless assertions that Cameron makes in the video we're debunking today. That is a video by him all about demon possession, something apologists love to make videos about, whether it is hell or the rapture, or the Antichrist, or demons or devils, possession, exorcisms. They all bring in a lot of views and they all work really well for what Christianity tries to use them for, which is fear, which is control, which is intrigue. But the amount of harm and problematic issues that come with the baggage of that, and then to have someone like Cameron just so boldly assert that these are actual evidences, that this is proof not only of demons, but then of Christianity, is incredibly careless of him. Even if these things existed, they would require way more due diligence than Cameron is doing. But aside from that, we have absolutely no reason to believe that these things do exist. All of the evidence, as you're going to see in today's video, is incredibly weak. And again, the harm that this does, I want to cover the harm really quick, and we're going to dive into watching every minute of his video and debunking it line by line. So first, it is, again, a tool of fear. It is some of the most traumatic things that happens to believers that take the longest after they deconstruct and deconvert to let go of. And of course they do. They work on the psyche in a way that other things don't, and they are meant to. Furthermore, they are typically used to exploit already weak, hurting, vulnerable people, especially those with any kind of mental illness or disability. It is truly disgusting, the practice of exorcisms in general, which leads to the third harm, which is that most of the time, especially if someone is seeking some kind of spiritual help or guidance for an issue that they have that is mislabeled as demonic activity, then they are not getting the real help that they need. It reinforces superstition. It is anti-science, causes abuse with a religious cover, also giving religious authorities abuse of power that they otherwise wouldn't have. Oh, your sickness that we now actually know is a verifiable sickness, something to do with either your body or your mind. No, we, the church, the spiritual authority in your life, are going to tell you it is something else that, of course, only we can cure. Yeah, that doesn't sound problematic at all. It also damages how people interpret ordinary struggles or mishaps in their life, even if it's not as far as some kind of mental illness. Addictions are so often labeled demonic activity, or even if it's not even as far as addiction, let's just say someone struggles with anger, or they struggle with pride or with lust. That's the demon in you. It also perpetuates stigma around mental illness. These people can't just be people who have something hurt in their mind, like people get something hurt in their body. It means that they've given themselves over to the devil, that they've allowed a foothold, that they are deceived and taken over and possessed. That's insane. And then again, as always, they end up being used as proof of Christianity. Cameron's going to do that in today's video as well. So I've said enough, but that's why I care about this. That's why we're going to be talking about it. And that's why people like Cameron need to have a hell of a lot better before they just blatantly pass along baseless assertions and nothing more. I was almost surprised at the audacity of this video, and then I remember that it comes from the kind of mind that hears Paul in one book say there were 500 witnesses and passes that off as actual 500 witnesses of an event. We're going to see the same kind of logical failings over and over and over in this video. So let's get to it.
This is a real photo from an exorcism. You'll see the full image and many far worse than this later in this video. A friend of mine recently sent me videos featuring a Catholic exorcist who has actually posted photos from cases that he's personally worked on. Some of these photos will shock you, others will maybe scare you, and a few might even repulse you. But more importantly, they might just change your entire worldview.
Now, we could be more generous here and say that an exorcism happened. That's just what the priest is calling when they try to remove a demon from a person's body. And this person may indeed have had this scar, and that photo may have actually been taken at this event that we're calling an exorcism. But when Christians communicate this, it is under the pretense that this was a real exorcism, that there was a actual demon who had possessed an actual body, and men, holy men of God, were actually removing, exorcising that demon, and that this is a real photo and thus proof of that event. So even if Cameron wants to hold on to, I actually didn't say anything untrue here, what it's communicating, which is again what he needs to be responsible for, is very different to a Christian audience, and he should know that. But in either case, we have absolutely no way to verify this. When you say something is a real photo, we don't know that without controls. This is the same thing you would need if you were using a photo as evidence in a courtroom. Where's the chain of custody? What is the context? Where are the timestamps? Where are the independent examiners? Where's the falsification checks? We have absolutely nothing but Cameron saying, trust me, bro. It's so cliche to say that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, not anecdotes plus pictures. But again, when you consider who the intended audience is and what the intended goal of sharing this is, those things don't matter, but they should.
Before we get to these shocking images, and believe me, they are pretty shocking, I want to introduce you to the exorcist behind these disturbing photos. This is Monsignor Stephen J. Rossetti, one of the most visible and respected exorcists in the Catholic Church today. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, who exactly is this guy, and why should we believe that his photos aren't staged? These are very good questions. I'm really glad that you asked. Monsignor Rossetti isn't just a priest. He's also a licensed psychologist, an author, and a former intelligence officer who graduated from the U.S. Air Force Academy. He has a PhD in counseling psychology, has served as president of the St. Luke Institute, and for the last 15 years, he's been conducting exorcisms for the Archdiocese of Washington. This is a guy with serious credentials, serious authority, and frankly, a serious amount to lose by fabricating evidence.
Cameron is building the case. If he can show the validity of the individual who's making the assertions, then maybe it will reflect on the validity of the actual assertions themselves. But that's not how it works. There's a term for this, appeal to authority. Now, sometimes an appeal to experts is something worth taking note, but no appeal to credentials does anything to say that this man is not a grifter or a liar, which Cameron also tries to establish. He would have a lot to lose. You mean just like every single priest who raped a little boy? And yet that number is insane. What we're just supposed to believe that any high-ranking person won't do anything bad or illegal or incorrect because they have a lot to lose. This is the most naive statement I can think of. Think about what is going on both sides of the political party right now with the Epstein files. What if the defense was, these are some of the most rich, wealthy, powerful people in the world. They have too much to lose. They're not going to put it all on the line to rape little boys and girls. And so no, I am not convinced at all that we should just take the word of this guy because, well, if he got caught, it might look bad. First of all, these people get caught all the time and almost nothing happens. To them, I'm sure it is well worth the risk. Now, that's not me making assertions back. That is a known fact that people in power do stupid and illegal things, despite their credentials, despite their reputations. But again, the Christian ear hears, oh my gosh, look at all of that. This guy must really know what he's talking about. You mean when it comes to fairy tales? Again, I know I'm being harsher on this video, and I do not care. This should have the utmost scrutiny, not the biggest pass ever. And you're about to see just how poor this evidence is.
Let's get to these images. And just a quick warning, if you're easily unsettled, this is your last chance to turn off this video. All right, with Rossetti's credentials on the table, it's time to examine some of the most visually jarring signs of possession. Mysterious scratches and bruises. Let's start with this first case.
And this is interesting that this person came to once at my office and she had these strange bruises and scratches. And you were saying, you know, where'd you get those? She thought it was demonic. And I said, nah, go home. And then it turned out that she actually was possessed. That one of the signs of it, ancillary signs, these unexplained scratches and bruises. It makes sense though. Why? What does Satan try to do? He tries to destroy and to kill and to maim, if he can. That's Satan's plan. What's shocking these days when you look at some of the things online that young people are saying, you know, Satan's is your friend. They got statues of Baphomet. You ever seen the statues of Baphomet thing? Yeah. I've got someone who's possessed by a bunch of demons, the Baphomet's the head demon, and she said, he is vicious. And he basically tortures everyone. He knows what your weaknesses are, and he'll torture with you with it. Baphomet is not your friend.
See what I mean? I almost don't know where to start. First of all, you don't just get to call a basic blurry picture of a cut/bruise strange. We have no reason to believe that this is a strange occurrence. Again, it's just more loaded language to continue to make this more eerie and supernatural. Just the same way that I think that was the third iteration of Cameron prepping his audience for how horrific these pictures are, how jarring. This is your last chance to turn back. You're upping the ante for the supernatural effect to begin, and then shown the most basic photo. That doesn't need to be fake or doctored because this is a nothing photo, but we are told it comes from a real exorcism, and there's tactics going on here. And I was in sales too long not to see how shifty and shady this is. You're going to see this more than once from this guy, where he does this push away. Oh, this person comes in, they're claiming that it's demonic, he sends them away. Did you hear how dismissive he was? That's supposed to give us the confidence that he has high standards. But this person came back, and guess what? It was actually demonic activity. Well, how do we know that? What changed? Well, his next line is that one of the signs is unexplained bruises. Oh, did you not have that conversation the first time when you dismissed her? She comes back a second time and she says, I don't know where it came from, and now you know for sure it's demonic. First of all, where is God in all of this? You would think these men of God might have the Holy Spirit working in them with some kind of level of discernment to be able to know what is a false claim or a real claim, what is demonic activity versus psychiatric or mental issues. But no, I guess she forgot to mention it was unexplained, comes back, says, but I don't know where they came from. He says, hey, we have a demon here. This is the level of expertise that we are working with when we're supposed to just buy into his, again, baseless assertions, the term of the day. It's like when Tucker Carlson said he was attacked by demons only to find out that he sleeps with his dogs. What's the more simple explanation for the scratches on your back? And this is the problem when you fill people's heads with how real the dark supernatural world is, that the spiritual realm is even more real than the physical one, which is something I heard a million times growing up. Then this is what people do. They falsely attribute first to that more real realm than the fact they bumped into something without noticing. And then he says that makes sense because, again, what is the goal of Satan, as we all know? Which, first of all, show me the Bible verse, because he's already conflating Satan with the devil. See the video I just did. You go through the Old Testament and you tell me how any actual Hebrew word of Satan has anything to do with this entity that is sneakily rolling around trying to kill you or maim you if he can. I remember in the story of Job, when Satan gets express permission from God to torture Job, he went up behind him in his sleep and made a weird little bruise on his back. Torture over. Nope, that's not what happens. And that would be the only biblical example, if we're using the term Satan, we could even pull on of that kind of an entity causing physical damage to an actual human being. But forget all that. We'll just talk about some New Testament verses that have their own claims out of left field based off totally other cultural influences that none of the ancient Hebrew Bible had, because it makes for a better story and a better line of work for an exorcist. And then the ending part of this thing, the whole Baphomet thing, is so ridiculous. And again, another wonderful sign that this guy has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. I'm not saying that he is wrong within certain Catholic understandings of these things, as they've developed their entire own fan fiction where you have all these different demons with all these different names and there's a hierarchy in place. And of course, every person they meet always has one of the really important demons assigned to them, which, don't get me started on, if we did like a probability test, the chances of all these people getting Satan himself, the devil himself, symbols, not demons like Baphomet. So I'm not going to go on a huge tangent here, but the first time we hear about Baphomet is in the trial of the Knights Templar, where some Templars, under torture, by the way, again, gotta love those good old Christians, confess to worshiping an idol of Baphomet. That's what is said. Most historians agree that this was either a mistranslation of them saying Muhammad, or that this was just made up as a justification for what they did to them. And then it would take all the way till 1856 before we get this symbol, which is now kind of associated with Satanist, which is again why it's in that cultural zeitgeist for the Christians of how bad this thing is. It's used as a symbol, not an actual individual of course, this isn't anywhere to be found in the Bible. This is all just done after the fact. But many Christians eat it up. Oh, wow. Oh, no, that's terrible. She had that one and it works like that. This guy's writing books about this stuff. Good Lord. The next time I get accused of being a grifter, I'm just going to remind everyone how much money I could make with the simplest of jobs, spouting nonsense to people who desperately want to believe it, not having to do any due diligence, research, be accountable for what I say, etc. Goodness gracious. But we are taking a long time. We better keep moving.
So here, Rossetti describes a woman who came to his office with these deep bruises that she couldn't explain. She suspected demonic involvement, and as it turns out, she was right. She's one of the rare exceptions, and he even later confirmed that she was possessed. And notice, this is not some random woman on the internet posting weird body marks, okay, on her X account. This is a documented case handled by a church-authorized exorcist where the injuries had no known cause and align with what he describes as a classic sign of demonic affliction. From a medical standpoint, spontaneous injuries without trauma, especially ones that correlate with spiritual symptoms, should not exist. But here they are.
I'm sorry, I forgot the insanity that he says afterwards, where he just totally doubles down on this being so valid. And he tries to hedge off the people that might say, well, that just sounds pretty random to me. It would be if it was just some woman posting on X, but when it is some priest whose entire business is exorcisms, then I guess it's totally believable. It's not like the Catholic Church has a history of being dead wrong about things. And that's all this is, a huge appeal to the authority of this particular group when it comes to these things. And you have the disingenuous statements alongside that just make all of this look 10 times worse, that there was no known explanation. Yeah, I woke up today and my foot hurt a little bit. I don't know why, but my first thought isn't demons. Maybe I stepped on something. Maybe it cramped in the middle of the night when I was asleep. Maybe my dog who sleeps with me scratched it. Maybe I'm having a flare-up of my old PF injury. I don't know. But that means nothing. And then the second thing he said, which is even worse somehow, is that medically speaking, spontaneous injuries without trauma, especially ones that correlate to spiritual symptoms. I'm sorry, medically speaking, what is a spiritual symptom? He's pulling this out of thin air. This is nothing.
Take a look at this next image.
If you want to say what is an exorcism and what's this whole thing about, it's very simple. Satan basically says, you belong to me. This is a real picture. I use these with possession, permission. I got a possession in my brain. Permission. Back of her neck, possessed woman. Showed up in the morning, preternaturally, disappeared in a couple days, which is impossible. It's an upside down cross. See, Satan he takes holy things and he twists them. Why is 3 o'clock in the morning the demonic hour? Because he takes the 3 o'clock hour that Jesus died and twists it in the middle of the night. That's why at 3 in the morning, if something bad's going to happen, sometimes it's 3 in the morning. And so anyway, Satan's basically saying, this woman belongs to me. She's mine. And oftentimes one of the first words you're going to hear out of a possessed person's mouth when they're manifesting is, he belongs to me.
This photo shows an upside down cross that appeared overnight on a woman's neck and then completely vanished within days. Rossetti interprets this as a sort of mockery of Christ's crucifixion, a signature of demonic symbolism. Temporary skin marks that manifest and disappear without explanation and carry specific theological meaning are very hard to chalk up to coincidence. This isn't just skin irritation or bruising, it's symbolic, timely, and coordinated with known patterns in exorcism cases. But if you thought that was strange, the next image is even more disturbing.
As we watch this, I'm not sure which is worse, what this priest is claiming or how Cameron speaks about it so confidently based off, again, nothing whatsoever. I am embarrassed at Cameron's lack of scrutiny here. When you take something like this that is so lowly and stupid in terms of credibility and build it up to the thing you need it to be while denying anything valid, change your channel to some conspiracy theory channel where you're like, hey, I heard about this. Isn't that weird? What do you guys think? That's not what his channel is. He's claiming Christianity is true, and he's putting forward these stories as if they are fact. But let's get into this one. Okay, what do we know? We have a singular picture and a story from a man. That doesn't make it untrue, but it doesn't make it true. Where's the continuous video? Where are the timestamps? Where's the medical documentation so that we can know when this showed up? What caused it? When did it actually go away? Where is the evidence for that? This is so pathetically inept. Again, it is embarrassing. And I'm not sure which part of this to address first. I guess the interpretation of the symbolism here. It couldn't be an upside down T. It's an upside down cross. We're already layering on meaning that simply isn't there. Then we're going to say we know what an upside down cross means. How do we know it's not an angel doing this, telling this person they're going to be the next person that gets crucified upside down? A story of humility before Christ. No, it's the devil. It's Satan. He wants to twist everything God does literally backwards. Or in this case, upside down, which is not the same thing as backwards. He doubles down on this being an MO of the enemy because have you ever noticed how spooky things happen at 3 a.m? It's not because most people are in deep REM by then. It's because Jesus died at 3, so the exact opposite would be 3 at night. First of all, you have conflicting timestamps about when Jesus died based off which gospel you read. But it's more convenient to go with the one at 3 o'clock when you want to talk about weird things going bump in the middle of the night. Both he and Cameron say it is impossible for this to happen organically. Yeah, the more likely explanation is definitely supernatural, and I guess that we'll just ignore what medicine has to say about this. There's a whole phenomenon, by the way, of these self-created lesions for psychological purposes. They're well documented in dermatology and psychiatry, and I have links below so you can see this for yourself. Also, yes, this can absolutely happen naturally and does, and we see it with many other symbols that have nothing to do with Christ when people wear necklaces and they sleep on them, especially if they haven't bathed, which is another sign of mental illness, not demonic activity. Not only can it irritate the skin over time, but it can cause these kinds of lesions. If not super deep or super infected, they can absolutely disappear within hours and days. And again, we have no reason to believe in the first place that this actually did disappear quickly. You need to show evidence of that. And again, if I haven't said it, I think I have, but I want to be clear about this. The process is first to rule these things out medically and psychiatrically. So where are the doctor notes? Where are the files? Where is any semblance of evidence at all other than this guy says, and here's a picture? Is it really impossible to believe that some people would do this to themselves? Maybe it's rare. Is it more feasible that Baphomet did it? Like, let's bring in Occam's razor just a little bit to this scenario. And they know this, which is why both of them just assert against actual evidence this can't happen. And even the medical experts will tell you as much. The dishonesty is really driving me mad when I know how many people are going to be negatively affected by these claims being circulated in such a true way.
But if you thought that was strange, the next image is even more disturbing.
The demonic scratches. You wake up in the morning and all of a sudden there's this demonic scratches. One possessed woman woke up with these. Can you see it on her back? As someone said, it looked like a beast raked his claws across her back. That's exactly what happened. A demonic claw went right down her back. And then she didn't feel it. She woke up, never felt it, and then it disappeared in 2 or 3 days. That's impossible. It's preternatural.
Now, here what we see, what appear to be claw marks. Rossetti says that they suddenly appeared, felt like a beast raked its claws down the woman's back, but she felt no pain. Just like the cross, they disappeared within 2 to 3 days. Injuries that look like animal attacks but appear spontaneously without pain and vanish without scarring, this flat out contradicts what we know about how the human body works. And again, these are photographed and described by a clinical psychologist who's also an exorcist with a lot to lose by faking these photos. Now, this is not the first time that this has happened, right? In the media, Tucker Carlson recently described that he experienced a very similar situation. He had claw marks on his side and on his back. I had Father Carlos Martins on the channel to give his assessment of that situation. If you'd like to watch that video, I've got it linked for right here for you guys. But the reason that these images are so powerful isn't just the shock factor, okay? It's what they imply. If any of this is real, even just one photo, then we're staring straight into the supernatural.
Okay, a lot of this is going to be the same, so I'll be more brief here. Again, we have absolutely no evidence to suggest that these photos are real, or if they are real, that it went away quickly in an unnatural or impossible way, as the priest claims. Cameron even uses the Tucker Carlson example to double down. Did you love the dramatic reenactment, by the way? And that he brings on some other father to get their take. There is no take. Tucker made a claim. I had scratches on my back and they didn't come from anything except demons. There's nothing to investigate. Just a bunch of men who work in the industry saying, yeah, that tracks. I love how it's supposed to feel like a beast did it, but also they had no pain. How do you know it felt like a beast did it then? This idea that people would have definitely felt it. No, some people sleep really deep. They might have felt it and forgot it. Or here's one. They might be lying about it. People can do this to themselves. Maybe someone had kind of a wild night and they're a good Christian person, so it definitely didn't come from sex. So when someone sees it, they say, oh, I don't know. And then since they're Christian, what's an easy manufactured response? Could it be demons? Now, I'm not saying that's what these are, but again, what is more likely? And these are just a few of our options. A wild sexual encounter, a wild beast that does live in their house and sleeps with them like a dog, someone doing it to themselves for attention or because of a disorder, and this is another one, some other unknown thing that doesn't immediately lead to the supernatural event you want to happen that so happens to align with the religion you already believe in. So maybe one of those things over it's definitely the devil, but not to these guys. And by the way, here's the cool thing. I don't need to say that these photos were doctored. I don't need to say that they're fake photos. Each and every single one of these could have been on a real person that sought help from a priest or an exorcist who really took these photos themselves, and we'd still be holding all the same problems. So keep that in mind. Let's move on.
In the deeper that we go in these photos, the stranger it gets, because the next group of images centers on something even more unsettling: the eyes of the possessed. All right, quick pause. If you appreciate this type of content that I'm putting together here, the deep research, the rare footage, then consider supporting the channel on Patreon. Videos like this take a ton of time, editing, and behind the scenes work to produce. Plus, YouTube doesn't exactly like this type of content. So if you'd like to help keep this channel alive, no pun intended, and help me expose the intellectual and supernatural side of Christianity, head over to our Patreon linked in the description.
Sorry, I'm going to do something I don't typically do. I always like to go off of the actual claims made in videos and just respond to that and really not get anywhere near the person. But this little commercial I have big issues with, and not because it's a commercial. By all means, promote your channel. By all means, ask people to join your Patreon. Hey, join my channel and my Patreon, by the way. But the things being said here are a bit ridiculous. This is not deep research. As far as I can tell, no research at all. Looking up the credentials of the guy you want to build credibility so you can appeal to authority to make your case for demon possession to prove that your particular religion is true takes all of 30 seconds. Other than that, what research was done here? Because all I can see is someone parroting exactly essentially the claims made in the clips that he is playing. And what does he mean YouTube doesn't exactly like this? His biggest videos without fail are only when he talks about the supernatural. This is a false claim. And then saying that it's exposing the intellectual and supernatural side of Christianity, you're not exposing the intellectual side of Christianity. This is anti-intellectualism. This is the lowest bar for scrutiny of extraordinary claims. So again, by all means, go join Cameron's Patreon if you watch him and you want to support him making more videos. But selling yourself so dishonestly, sorry, we're going to call it out. And just so I can be as upfront as possible, yeah, join my Patreon. And mine is simple. The only way I can continue to take this amount of time away from my other additional endeavors to make money is to have this be profitable. If it's not, my time goes away. So if you like this and you want me to keep doing it, I too would ask you to give. Anyways, I apologize truly if I'm off base. I don't think that I am, but I know I'm coming at this video harsher than most Tuesday critiques. Hopefully I've explained why.
All right, back to the insanity. We've seen scratches and bruises that shouldn't exist, but now we're stepping into much darker territory. These next images don't just show physical injuries. They show something much deeper, the distortion of the human face itself. According to Monsignor Rossetti, these photos were not staged, they were not altered, and they capture something almost no one ever sees: the eyes of the possessed. Let's start with this first image.
I'm a psychologist. All I can say is this is a common question that I get is it a psychological illness or an evil spirit? It's a complex question many times, but usually you can answer it fairly quickly after a few sessions. You should have a good idea whether it's a possession case or a psychological illness. But sometimes, it doesn't take a rocket science to figure it out. Here's a guy who's manifesting. He had normal eyes, and his eyes turned into the eyes of a serpent. He had those dots. And the eyes turned yellow.
In this clip, Rossetti describes a man whose eyes suddenly transformed during a possession episode. His normal eyes shifted into what Rossetti calls serpent eyes, with a yellow, almost reptilian hue in the irises. In nature, several species of serpents, like the mangrove snake or the boomslang, have striking yellow or gold eyes with round pupils. In scripture, of course, the serpent is the ultimate symbol of deception and evil. Genesis 3 introduces Satan in the form of serpent, and then in Revelation 12, it explicitly calls him that serpent who leads the whole world astray. So when someone's eyes suddenly resemble a snake's, not just symbolically, but visually, it's not just unsettling. It's actually theologically loaded. You're looking directly at a biblical archetype coming to life. And it gets worse, like a lot worse.
So there are lots of people who are what we call partially possessed or oppressed or obsessed, and they're not fully possessed, but they really do have a demonic problem. So there's a whole range of demonic involvement. Here's another person, her eyes turned black, both of them, fully black, and the discernment was not hard.
This clip shows a woman whose eyes became entirely black. No whites, no iris, nothing, just full blackness. Rossetti says almost casually, discernment was not hard. Fully black eyes are not just like a little abnormal. They're medically impossible without prosthetics or very, very serious trauma. But this wasn't Halloween makeup. According to Rossetti, this transformation happened during an episode of possession and reversed on its own. If he's telling the truth about these photos, there's something supernatural that's overridden the basic laws of biology. Remember, this isn't happening in a movie. Okay, this is a licensed psychologist and diocesan exorcist recounting events in a medical and pastoral setting. The consistent theme in both of these cases, the eyes reflect the presence of something inhuman. And in Christian theology, that actually makes perfect sense. The eyes are often described, as the window to the soul, but in these images, it's like something else is staring back.
Let's stop here and address a few things. First of all, yeah, the photos could be doctored. This guy could be a liar. Second of all, they don't have to be. You can have yellow eyes, black eyes, and red eyes, all from medical conditions. You can also get lenses that look just like these things. And again, this could just be a made-up story or something that was exaggerated. Since there are medical conditions that can cause any of this, and since we know it's much easier to fake this than a supernatural event happening, we need more evidence. How about just going to an eye doctor? Have him rule out any condition that could possibly cause this for this individual. Why not? If what Cameron said, which we didn't address a minute ago, is true, that if only one of these photos is real, then it is absolute evidence of the supernatural, which later he's going to bridge that claim over to that meaning that Christianity is true. Why would you not, if this stuff is real, as the exorcist, take this person to whatever doctor you need to, a dermatologist, an eye doctor, etc., and get as much proof, physical evidence to convert the skeptics like me? You absolutely would, unless you don't have that, unless you know it's not going to hold up, which is why all you have are stories and ridiculous photos. It's 2025. Take a video. And if your answer right now is, well, with AI, all these videos can easily be doctored. Oh, and so what? Pictures can't? But we're going to leave the photo thing alone. I just wanted to make sure we're covering from all angles here. But of course, it's all about interpretation. Oh, well, that to me looks like a snake. And then Cameron, who should know so much better, says that in Genesis 3, Satan is introduced in the form of a serpent. No, he's not. He's introduced as a serpent, the most cunning of all the animals. It is only that verse in Revelation that he mentions that is retconned on afterwards that links those. That's it. And if that's all we're using, then there's so many animals that would be considered demonic. And half of these animals are also used to represent God sometimes, like a lion. Could have been a goat, a dragon, a locust, a scorpion, a dog, a wolf. Oh, but this one happened to look like a snake, and snakes are one of many animals associated with the enemy of God, and so there. No, not there. You've done nothing. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to say here is the whole section started off with this discernment slide, how you can know it's really demon possession. And the eye thing was his example of sometimes you don't have to be a genius to know. But otherwise, he says it can take a few sessions. I would like to just say that if God is real, if the stories about Jesus, the ultimate exorcist, are real, and he has given his power in the form of his spirit, and even though the verse in Mark was definitely a later addition, to Christians who accept this as their canon, they still have to contend with the fact it says, you will do greater things than even I. And we see other of Jesus's followers cast out demons. So this is something that, yes, within Christianity should be done, is a real thing. But why all of the unsureness? Why 2 or 3 sessions, unless they have yellow eyes that tell you better, because you have no idea what jaundice is, before you can declare it? Is that to give some shade of credibility that you don't just label everyone demonic and therefore you are respecting the science, but when science fails, the authority of God kicks in? Why isn't there 100% certainty within the first second of meeting someone because of the discernment and knowledge and power of the Holy Spirit dwelling inside you? Why can you be wrong like he said he was in the beginning when he sent the lady away? Think about that. If that woman was actually possessed and seeks help from a man of God, an authoritative expert, one of the most well-respected exorcists in all the land, he dismissed her so easily and self-admittedly was wrong. Who's to say he's not wrong when he labels someone being possessed? The only authority we should be attributing to him, if all of this were real, is that he has God on his side. But that wouldn't look so faulty. It wouldn't have to contend with the physical and the mental, which is only, by the way, a new contention once we actually learned about some of these things. And there will be things we still learn yet that might even look mysterious or even, dare I say, miraculous until we find out more later. Like, again, imagine 500 years ago when people didn't know what jaundice was and you saw a yellow eye. In fact, this is a perfect time to make this point. I saw this video, which is a natural phenomenon that science can explain, and it looks crazy. And if I was a lunatic evangelical who was anti-intellectual in science and I saw this, I'd yell demon too. But there's a perfectly fine explanation for it, but not one we had 1,000 years ago. My point being, people can be wrong, and science usually ends up explaining a lot of it. We don't need this. Because I know there will still be Christians that say, I don't know. What if it's none of those conditions? What if we can absolutely encounter someone who has this mark or this eye color or something and it's actually unexplained? Then it's unexplained. That does not immediately then make it, just because we don't have an answer for it yet, the thing you want it to be based off your beliefs. I cannot emphasize this enough. Also, I just remembered he said that fully black eyes are medically impossible. Then he lists something that, yeah, we don't need medicine for, prosthetics. Then he says, or very, very serious trauma. Oh, so they are medically possible. You just said they were medically impossible. And then again, at the end of that segment, we hear more of the appeal to authority, the one he keeps making that means absolutely nothing when it comes to this. And also that within Christian theology, this makes perfect sense. And he quotes that we've all heard the eyes are like windows to the soul, which is not biblical at all. Like, it's just all over the place. But next, he's going to tell us why he personally has taken such a deep interest in this topic.
All right, before we move on to the most disturbing set of photos yet, and trust me, I'm not exaggerating when I say that, I want to remind you why I've personally taken such a deep interest in exorcisms and demonic possession. If demonic possession is real, and based on the evidence so far, it's getting really hard to deny, then the implications are massive. During exorcisms, it consistently appears that demons operate under a uniquely Christian framework. They respond to Christian prayers, fear Christian symbols, and most importantly, are expelled through Christian rituals. This isn't just Rossetti's experience either. Take the Ammons haunting in Indiana, where a mother and her children were tormented by paranormal activity for months. Psychics, clairvoyance, and folk remedies failed completely. It wasn't until a Catholic priest performed 3 formal exorcisms that the manifestations stopped. And that's according to a Department of Child Services report and hospital staff. Or consider Cedric Kanana, a Rwandan man whose family tried indigenous rituals and even Muslim exorcisms with absolutely no success. Only after turning to an Anglican priest and receiving deliverance prayers in Jesus' name did he recover. later becoming a pastor himself. Even in Cairo, a Muslim man brought their possessed mother to a Coptic Christian exorcist after their local Muslim imam couldn't do anything to help her. The demon reportedly fled only after the priest invoked the Trinity, something that left even the Muslim family stunned. In case after case, only Christian rights seem to have the power to stop what nothing else could. So if we're being intellectually honest, these aren't just creepy stories. We're seeing a consistent pattern of reports across continents, across cultures, and even time periods of supernatural beings obeying only Christian authority. And that should make you actually pause. If demons are real and they bow to Jesus alone, that's not just spooky, it's a powerful argument that Christianity is true.
The very fact that Cameron used the term intellectual honesty in this series of clips is astounding because he's so dead wrong about almost everything he has said so far, including the claims he made in the last clip that I just showed. Again, I told you he was going to try to tie all this into proving that Christianity is true. So he has the audacity to say that it's getting pretty hard to deny that these demonic forces exist based off what he has shown us so far, which no, it is not. And then he gives a bunch of anecdotal stories where other forms of exorcisms didn't work, but Christians were the only ones that could. Therefore, if supernatural demonic activity exists and exorcisms can only happen by Christians, then Christianity is true. Again, first you'd have to prove that this stuff is true, and we're nowhere near that. But I want to focus on this second problem. Even if we could prove demonic activity is real, it does not get us to Christianity. For every story or video of a Christian exorcism going well, there is one for a Buddhist exorcism or an Islamic exorcism. Or a Hindu exorcism. This is what it looks like to be ignorant of world religions and comparative religion. Now, I understand he's going to dismiss those things as fake, as false, but it's the exact same evidence. So if he's going to accept stories and photos as evidence for Christian exorcism working, then he has no right to deny the evidence for the other religions. Across the world, exorcisms work in the religion the sufferer believes in. Relief tends to actually track the cultural expectation of the individual. So Christianity is not unique here. And psychiatry has quite a bit to say about this. These are called possession form experiences, and they're recognized presentations within dissociative identity disorder, and something else called ICD-11 trance disorder. Yes, there's real distress, but it's natural mechanisms. And guess what? They respond to all kinds of things like context, suggestion, trauma history, and therapeutic framing. So even if the stories that Cameron claims here are true, it's what we would expect. And it's also what we see in other cultures. I wonder how he explains after the tsunami in Japan. This is an easy story you can look up. There were these things called tsunami ghosts or tsunami demons. And journalists documented, which is a lot more than we have for many of the things Cameron is talking about, the communities turning to Buddhist and Shinto rites for relief. It was presented as effective by locals, by people that already had that as their cultural framing. Are you a Buddhist now? Why not? Literally, it's that simple. There's a story, we at least have journalists telling it. It brought people relief who labeled the natural phenomenon they were dealing with, probably PTSD, as tsunami ghosts. They turned to the religion that was common for their culture and time to provide the expected relief, and for some it worked and was documented. That's it. That's all any of this ever is. There's no reason to go beyond that. And so again, you have a huge problem when you want to take this past the supernatural to a particular religion while ignoring all of the times it works for other religions. It's so dishonest. And I'm not going to go through story by story, but we'll just, for an example, talk about the Ammons haunting, what we really know. A refresher on what Cameron claimed.
Take the Ammons haunting in Indiana, where a mother and her children were tormented by paranormal activity for months. Psychics, clairvoyants, and folk remedies failed completely. It wasn't until a Catholic priest performed 3 formal exorcisms that the manifestations stopped. And that's according to a Department of Child Services report and hospital staff.
First of all, why did it take 3 times? How unpowerful is God? It's almost like there were some other natural things at play. Those little details just crack me up in these kinds of stories. What we actually have is a treating physician that documented delusions of ghosts and said that he himself was unconvinced that anything paranormal occurred. The landlord, who by the way noted rent issues, said that it was a hoax. Other tenants said that there was nothing going on. But the biggest claim is the Department of Child Services, and it was easy enough to dig into this. Again, Cameron's citing all this deep research he did, but here's what we do actually know is yes, the Indiana Department of Child Services removed the children in early 2012 following an anonymous complaint. They cited concerns over neglect and potential harm. They did a multi-month investigation into the family. They set up a family compliance plan, which include having to have secure housing, which sounds like it was the real issue. Again, going back to the landlord and the rent issues. And the closest I can get to any part of his claim being true is noting that some of the hospital staff did report weird circumstances, but the agency's position in the official reporting remains neutral. Again, I'm not going to go through all the other cases because it's just more of the same. And until Cameron is going to accept all the other cases that sound as plausible, this is a nothing burger to the highest degree.
Now buckle up because we're about to step into the weirdest, strangest, most bizarre part of this video. If you're squeamish or the type to look away, now's your chance. We've seen bruises, we've seen eyes, but now we're entering truly bizarre territory. What you're about to witness are photos of objects. Yes, physical objects that were allegedly expelled from possessed individuals during exorcisms. These are things that should not be in a human body, period. If any of this is real, even just one case, we're no longer in naturalistic territory.
This was spit out of someone at the end of an exorcism a few weeks ago.
One looks like a bolt.
Bolt in a washer. Now, this was not in the person's stomach. It vomited out, right? When part of the healing process, people will often vomit this white foam, not food, it's white foam, and they'll vomit this stuff. And sometimes they'll vomit things which would not be in their bodies, but materialize in their mouth. And there've been all sorts of crazy things. But this happened just very recently. We had someone who had previously been a drug addict, and it was clean. These needles kept falling off, and which materialized.
Wow. So the material spat out those needles?
This actually would materialize and fell off his body, which would.
I see.
You watch them fall off his body.
I gotcha.
But these were actually spit out, and yes, they do spit out crazy things, and so at times things happen in an exorcism which are humanly impossible. Now, we have not had a levitation yet, although I know some teams that have, and I'm sure it's just a question of time, before we do.
Rossetti describes how at the end of an exorcism, a person spat out a bolt and washer. These weren't like swallowed items. According to him, they materialized in the person's mouth and then were coughed out. He also mentions another case, a former drug addict, where needles repeatedly materialized and fell off his body during the healing process. Now look, either Rossetti is completely making this stuff up entirely, or you have to contend with what kind of force can insert like solid metal into the human body and then somehow remove it. But did you actually catch what Rossetti said at the end of this clip?
Now, we have not had a levitation yet, although I know some teams that have, and I'm sure it's just a question of time, before we do.
That line is actually really crucial. Okay, this is the kind of thing that hoaxers don't say. He's not pretending to have seen every kind of like spooky phenomenon. In fact, he's admitting he hasn't seen the most cinematic one, the levitation. And that honesty actually strengthens his credibility. If he were trying to impress you, that's the first thing he'd fake, right? Instead, what you see is a guy who's actually telling the truth, or pulling off one of the most elaborate spiritual frauds in modern history.
Oh my gosh, it's so dramatic. One of the most elaborate spiritual frauds in modern history. No, go to any faith healing Sunday service and you're going to see something equal to or greater than. Over and over and over, it's this appeal to, this guy wouldn't be making this stuff up, and we're going to get back to the things that materialized, but I want to point out the thing that Cameron thinks is the most important here, which is if this guy was really a fraudster, if he was really trying to pull one over on you, wouldn't he be trying to impress you with insane things? You mean like needles this big materializing out of thin air? Are we just acting like that's not an insane claim? This is actually a really common thing that we see with liars, a push away. Watch any prosperity gospel teaching right before they ask for the money. You might get a push away that looks like this. Now, I'm not saying God's going to make you a millionaire, but if you sow, you're going to reap. Maybe that looks like $100. Maybe it looks like $1,000. Maybe it looks like covering your mortgage, or maybe it looks like $20,000. $20,000 is still an insane claim that God's going to do. But by saying, I'm not saying it's going to be $1 million, you're not saying it can't happen, just like he's not going to say levitation can't happen. In fact, I expect that we'll see it in time. It is done exactly for the hook that Cameron bit, to make the other things sound all of a sudden more true. And by the way, he doesn't even have to be a scheming, horrible person for all of this to be the case. Just presenting one alternative theory, people that are unwell to the point of getting involved in an exorcism might be the same kind of people that swallow a nut and bolt. And despite Cameron saying nothing can make metal materialize inside of someone and then come out, I don't know, I think vomiting could. That's not insane. Like this could have even, we're giving so much credit that doesn't need to happen. That could have happened during an exorcism and it doesn't prove anything. A drug addict rolling around while priests essentially abuse him and a couple needles fall out of his pocket and one of the priests says, look, they're materializing out of him. I can see that absolutely happening. So no, it's not some black or white. He's either the biggest fraudster ever, or this definitely happened in the sensational way that proves my religion true. And that's just me off the top of my head giving one quick example. And if you think that my example sounds far-fetched, but you're willing to accept the Christian idea on it, you don't actually think it sounds far-fetched. It just doesn't vibe with your current belief. A little critical thought.
All right, let's move on. And just to warn you guys, this one does get pretty gross.
It's a process of purification, as it is for all of us. By the way, this is what one of our possessed people coughed up. Yeah, it is that bad. And that's why, I mean, if that was in her stomach, she would have died, right? I mean, it's black. And actually, the doctor said it was moving. It was sitting there moving. You know, and someone said, you should do a DNA on it or do a scientific chemical. I said, what are you kidding me? We flushed it down the toilet and threw holy water on it. I mean, we're not going to. So anyway, yeah, I mean, it was just, you're looking at a picture of it, and it happened several times with her. She was cursed. Her mother was a witch, and they cursed her big time. This is what came out. You want to go, really? Yes, you.
Rossetti recounts a woman coughing up this like black tar-like substance. A doctor was present and said the material was moving, not metaphorically, but visibly. And it was also toxic, according to Rossetti, toxic enough that if it would have killed her if she swallowed it. And look, this wasn't done in private and it wasn't anecdotal. A medical doctor witnessed it and confirmed that it was animated. Just think about that for a second. There are very few substances in the world that just sort of move on their own, and none that spontaneously form inside a person's body during prayer. And yet, that's exactly what's being claimed here. But now brace yourself, because there's another really disgusting example.
Well, this is someone we have has been cursed by a bunch of witches, big time. And she vomited up this black fluid, and it hardened. Oh, this is a real photograph. Hardened. Oftentimes when we reverse curses and get rid of them, sometimes the people will pass out of one of their orifices of their body some sign of spiritual sign of the curse being lifted. In this case, black stuff came out of her and solidified.
This photo shows a dark black liquid expelled by a woman who had been cursed by multiple witches. The liquid, according to Rossetti, hardened almost immediately. He says that this is a common thing that happens when curses are reversed, some physical sign of the curse like sort of exiting the body.
It just gets dumber and dumber. Again, the constant claiming just out of nowhere that this couldn't happen otherwise, that if this had been inside her, she would have been dead. Well, you said it was inside her and she wasn't dead. Oh, well, yeah, but that's because the demon was keeping her alive then. So the demon has this thing that would kill her, but he's the one purposely keeping her alive? Demons are sure pretty stupid and weird, causing scratches that don't hurt and disappear in a couple hours. Literally, what would be the point of that as a demon? If we get all screw tape letters on this and we try to think about the motivations of a demon, wouldn't you want to harm and torture the person, with the only limiting factor being that you wouldn't want it to lead to them getting healed, finding out that it's a demon, getting exorcised, or proving that Christ is true? They have all this magical ability to harm someone, but how about a 2-hour long scratch that disappears and doesn't hurt? Yeah, that makes sense. Now, on to this particular story. We heard a lot of things. We heard that it moved. We heard that it can't have been inside her without killing her otherwise. We heard that a doctor was there, but we also heard that it wasn't tested, but that it was toxic, and that they needed to flush it down the toilet immediately. And holy water? Was it a holy toilet? Who did the flushing? Did the doctor pick up the moving object and throw it in the toilet? I know that's a doctor's first go-to in the examination room. Definitely don't want to get this tested. Definitely don't want to follow up. Was the doctor at the exorcism, or was the exorcist at the doctor? Because I've got questions either way. Where's the proof? Where's the medical charts? Or maybe this is just someone who was a medical professional, to whatever that means, or they claimed, who already believes in this stuff. And after this person vomited up, he could have been a foot doctor, and he was like, well, that's not normal. That can't have been in her without killing her, except for, demons. The story's insane, and there's like so many examples of things this could be. The number one thing that shows up as dark or black is clotted blood. Coffee ground emesis is the word for it. Or maybe this person was, again, mentally unwell, and they do a lot of mentally unwell things. Maybe they drank out of sewage. Maybe they ate an animal and it wasn't digested yet. Again, I know that this is whatever, but there's so many things it could be before you jump to moving demonic property that we know was toxic but wasn't tested, that a doctor saw but chose to flush, and also holy water. I don't have to tell you exactly what it was. I can give you so many more likely scenarios. But saying something like that couldn't be in her stomach without killing her as a fact is stupid and wrong and dishonest. These aren't just wrong statements. You have to almost work hard not to educate yourself at all as to the other potential possibilities here. Also, here's a picture of dog vomit. I wonder if this dog was also possessed. And I'm not saying that the last picture of the witch's black liquid thing being faked, but a reverse image search shows this. Meteorites and gems. Not claiming he for sure took a picture like this, but this is the problem with just showing one still image attached to this huge story we are all supposed to just accept, because this guy definitely doesn't have any financial reasons like the books that he sells about the very subject, or his more famous online presence than most other exorcists in his field. It's not like he has any motives here, but let's see what happens next.
Now look, if this were just like one story, you could maybe chalk it up to coincidence or fakery, but the repetition matters. Over and over, we're seeing symbolically charged, medically inexplicable matter emerging from victims. And in every case, it happens in the context of Christian prayer and ritual, not New Age meditation, not secular therapy, not Islamic deliverance prayers, but explicitly Trinitarian invocations. At this point, I get it, like you're either completely convinced, totally skeptical, or somewhere in between, or you might just be really, really grossed out. Stick around, because in these last couple of minutes, I'm going to explain exactly why these bizarre images cannot be easily dismissed as clever hoaxes.
So I'm glad he did it for like a fourth or fifth time, because I keep forgetting to mention this. He keeps talking about how there's so many instances, so many images, so much proof that even if only one of these is true, and it tries to convey to you by this plethora of evidence that sure, maybe some of them can be your skeptical mishaps, but surely not all of them. And all it takes is one. No, they can all be wrong. And he says again that it's only happening under Christian pretenses. Nope, that's also wrong. He just doesn't accept all the other ones, or doesn't know about, or won't look them up. All the other cultures that do exorcisms, that work, that have projectile, and all of these other things. And there's tons of evidence for that. If only one of those is true, nope, none of them are true to him. But here, oh my gosh, the overwhelming evidence. It's too clear. Dishonest. honest. But yeah, he gave you're either on the fence or you're totally not convinced or you're not. Yeah, you listed all the possibilities. Great. But he has an answer for us. This is the final thing that's going to pull everyone over to the side that this is all obviously true. Let's see what this great additional evidence is.
First, consider Rossetti himself a reluctant witness. Remember earlier when he openly admitted that he's never seen the most cinematic phenomenon of all, levitation? Liars and fraudsters typically exaggerate their claims for dramatic effect. Rossetti doesn't, though. Instead, he sets a tone of measured honesty. If he were trying to trick us, he's going about it in a really weird way.
Okay, so point one we have dealt with completely. He is still making absurd and ridiculous claims. The fact that he doesn't make one other potential absurd and ridiculous claim does not all of a sudden make these other absurd and ridiculous claims more measurable, more reasonable, more real. It doesn't work that way. It's funny because, and I haven't shared this on my channel yet, I have a really high IQ, and I actually have a degree that I haven't talked about, but I've been wanting to tell you guys about. It's not like I have 3 degrees. I'm not some mastermind, but I did score highest at this university that's pretty prestigious. I'll tell you the name here in a second. It's not like it's Cambridge, but it's up there. Now, whatever I say, whatever degree I say that I have, or Ivy League school that I went to, that claim doesn't become all of a sudden more real because I denied a greater claim of Cambridge or 3 degrees. It's so simple. But he's got a second point. Let's see what that is.
Second, he explicitly said, these are real photos. I didn't Photoshop these things, to a room full of skeptical priests.
This is sort of the core of an exorcism, and actually all of life, frankly. What is this on the side of this bird? These, by the way, all the photos you're going to see are real photos. I gave this talk to a bunch of priests or something similar, and they all said, I don't believe this. I don't believe those photos. These are real photos, by the way. I didn't Photoshop these things.
Think about the stakes here. Okay, he put his professional and personal reputation on the line by showing these photos. Either he's carrying out one of the most audacious and risky hoaxes ever seen in modern religious history, or he's genuinely documenting supernatural phenomenon. If you're committed to dismissing this evidence somehow, you've got to provide some kind of naturalistic explanation that covers all of these phenomena. Overnight injuries that heal impossibly fast, verified object materialization, consistent symbolic patterns across multiple cases, and a credible, highly respected witness who's explicitly avoided sensationalism. Honestly, the simplest explanation might be the hardest one for skeptics to accept, that at least some of these incidents are genuinely supernatural. So, what is your verdict? Are we looking at the hoax of the century, or is this chilling evidence that evil, supernatural evil, is real? Drop your thoughts below, and as always, remember, Christianity is true.
The black or white fallacies that Cameron continues to make truly astound me. It's either photoshopped in the greatest hoax of all time, or it's definitely true to the exact degree that he says proving Christianity. No, once again, none of these photos have to be fake or photoshopped. People get real injuries. People really vomit these things up. Bolts and nuts really exist. So do needles. Nothing we've seen here is impossible. Show a video of the scratches disappearing in real time, of the needles materializing, of the sludge running away, where a documented doctor flushed it in holy water or whatever. This guy can stand up there all he wants and say, I didn't doctor the photos. And that can even be true. It might not be, by the way, but it still could be true, and nothing else follows. Also, do I need to be the one to point out that his peer group doesn't believe him? This is exactly, you know what, I'm so glad this came up. This is what people do when they want to believe something. They'll hear him say, it's not like I've seen levitations. I'm like, look at his honesty. That's not what you would expect if he was grifting. And then that same person can say, you know, I was giving this lecture to a bunch of priests and none of them believed me. Look, it must be true then. Wait, which part of the logic are we following that means when his peer group doesn't believe him, he's telling even more the truth? It's kind of like anything you get, you'll consider evidence, and good evidence, that actually proves the outcome you want. Those happenings or occurrences mean nothing to the validity of a claim. Photoshop isn't the standard we need to be worried about. Artifact bias might be. Confirmation bias might be. And you know what? Maybe just to help future exorcists get someone like myself to believe here's a few suggestions that you can easily do, right? If you took a picture, you can take a video. Let's do original files with metadata. That will help. How about continuous video at that from neutral parties? Maybe some control conditions or independent replications. Going back to the lesions, again, let's consult a dermatologist or an eye doctor or maybe a liver doctor for the eye colorings. Maybe check their Amazon shop history so there's no lenses that were purchased. And how about this? If someone projectile vomits up something that you say is impossible to be in the human body, let's have a video of them doing so, and then let's collect the specimens. You kept the screw, you kept the dirty drug addict's needles that demons manifested, but the black sludge you couldn't run a test on, a toxicology report, a material analysis. How about some witness statements? Maybe make those witnesses like that medical doctor that said he saw it moved and helped flush it with the holy water. Let's get them not only on record, but sworn declaration so that it's enforceable by law. Let's see how many witnesses still want to go through that. And again, you should want all this. You're obviously trying to present it as evidence because that's the counter. A lot of people say, they don't owe you anything. Yes, they do. If they're making a claim, they owe the proof of that claim. If they're trying to convince with evidence, they need to show why that's actual evidence. You don't have to. You can keep telling people to take it on faith. You can keep just saying, God's real, I know it, I feel it in my heart, and you can too. But when you're someone like this exorcist, or you're someone like Cameron, who are absolutely using this as a conversion tactic, then you are saying that this is evidence. And why would you not want it to be the best evidence? Why would you not assume that it could be? I think that's pretty telling. So to end, and to answer Cameron's very special pleading at the end, I am not the one that needs to provide a naturalistic outcome for every single phenomenon, though I think that I have. I'm okay saying I don't know. I'm not the one making a claim here based on literally a few pictures and stories from one motivated source. That is actually all you have. And I think I've shown good reason why it equals less than nothing, and even ends with a black and white fallacy. So which is it? All of this is real, or it's the greatest hoax of the century, or whatever he said? Neither. It doesn't have to be either. So the challenge I'll put out at the end of my video, like Cameron, is to him and people like him who say they're convinced of Christianity by this kind of evidence. You then need to explain why you are not convinced that when other religions claim supernatural healings or exorcisms, why that doesn't convince you of their God. That's the inconsistency that cannot be accounted for here. Not me not being able to come up with a perfectly natural explanation for the assertions that were put before me. Like the levels of psychology at work here that are so what we would expect, so completely ordinary and benign, yet to Cameron and people like him are so incredibly suggestive of divinity and their specific God. Like the littlest bit of not trying to jump straight to the supernatural and being okay with either I don't know or the very good and real human explanations we have. I'm just left at a loss for how it happens. And I only see a few options. Ignorance, which is why I'm wanting to do this video so that other people will not be swayed by this and won't go on to profess the same false claims as truth, which leads to more people being ignorant, denying science, and accepting superstitious claims like this that are harmful for all the reasons I started the video with. So ignorance is one. Greed is another, whether it's Cameron and his channel or any other apologist or the book sales of The Exorcist, or even if it's not for them personally, the greed for God to bring others into the fold. Why fact check myself when it's such a good story? Why do the deep research when it's just going to give me all these issues? Motives do matter, and corruption can be our last one. This absolutely could be a grift, or it could be someone who is ignorant that leads to a grift, or it could be a grift that leads to someone professing it who's ignorant. They can all work together. It can be confusion. We don't have to assign ill motives. That kind of goes back to the ignorance though. And all of those are so much more likely than a character whose evolution we can track into how they came about, which means we can understand their origin and their history and their lore and their legend, which means they're not a good fit when we have questionable, odd happenings, especially when time and time again, science or medicine or psychology or psychiatry has answered and filled in those gaps where these stories used to live so cozily. I hope that you have learned a few things about how to spot bad evidence, because it's everywhere for this religion, not just in its demon stories. The tactics that are used by that exorcist or by Cameron happen within Christianity and apologetics at large, regardless of the category. And I speak again for the person in between, struggling, doubting, afraid to wake up to the truth that they've been pressing down, because I know how convincing this might have sounded to me a decade ago, and I know how absolutely fraudulent it all is now. I'm willing to be wrong in terms of the supernatural. I'm willing to be wrong even in terms of specific religion. This isn't me committing to an idea and working it out at any cost. This is me not jumping so far outside of what we do know to accept the things we don't know as fact, in direct opposition to the mutually exclusive science, medicine, and examples that we do have. So if your God is real and the supernatural realm is this active, surely there's got to be better evidence than this. It's a joke to even call any of this evidence. Let me know if you liked this video. I know it was a deeper dive. I know we haven't done like a big debunking like this in a while, but pun intended, this one really gets my goat. I'll see you Thursday with a new Thinking Thursday episode where we are ever learning more how to be good skeptics, how to doubt well, learning from history so we don't repeat mistakes, and seeing what some of the greatest minds and tools have actually given us that we can use for practical application in our everyday life to not be fooled by ridiculousness like this. Until then, keep thinking. I wanted to personally thank my top tiers of support: my Iconoclast, Ann, Boris, Grant, GVI, Jimmy, Joe, Kiboga, Matthew, Perry, and Sean; my Humanist heroes, Craig, James, Jared, Christy, and Matthew; my Atheist advocates, Aquitar, Caleb, Dan, David, Drew, Jeff, Jeffrey, Julie, Malcolm, Paul, Sparky, and Thomas; as well as all of my secular scholar patrons. If you believe in the mission of this channel, please consider joining these fine people.